It is Sandra's 59th birthday. Not a big one. Not the kind anyone makes a fuss over. But she feels it differently this year. Not excitement, not dread exactly. Just a quiet awareness that the years are moving faster than the plan. Because somewhere between the cake in the break room and the messages on her phone, a thought surfaces that has nothing to do with celebrating. One more year, which means 1 year closer to the question she has been quietly circling for a while now. Whether she actually gets to stop at some point, or whether stopping is just something she keeps telling herself is coming without ever really knowing when or how. Then there is Diane. Same company, same title, same age. Diane turned 59 last year, and last month she sat across from Sandra at lunch and said she was thinking about stepping back at 63. Not retiring dramatically, just stepping back, working less, choosing more. And the way she said it, calm, like it was already decided, like the math had been done for a while, stayed with Sandra longer than she expected. Because Sandra could not say the same thing. Not with that ease, not with that certainty. Same career, same decade of life, two completely different financial realities underneath. And the question worth asking is, what exactly created that gap? And can Sandra still catch up? My name is Mila, and I'm obsessed with the small moves and hidden nuances that build real wealth. Today, we are covering 7 specific decisions you can make right now in your 50s that will determine whether later life feels free and self-directed, or tight, pressured, and permanently work-dependent. These are the exact decisions that separate Sandra from Diane, and every single one of them is still available to you. Here is what makes this decade different. Every decade before your 50s gave you something your 50s no longer give you in the same way: time. In your 30s, a financial mistake had 15 years of recovery room. In your 40s, course correction was still very possible. But in your 50s, the runway is genuinely shorter. And that changes the cost of delay. Your 50s also stop letting your financial life hide its own structure from you. You can earn well and still have almost no margin. You can own a home and still have your cash flow completely trapped. You can have retirement accounts and still be quietly behind where the math needs you to be. And you can look completely stable while privately knowing that one real disruption, a job loss, a health issue, a market shift, would land very differently than it would have 10 years ago. Your 50s do not just reveal how much money you have. They reveal how much freedom your life actually has. But here's what matters just as much. This is still the decade where the right decisions carry serious power. The runway is shorter, but what you do with it still determines whether the next chapter feels lighter and more self-directed, or heavier and more pressured. And that is exactly what the rest of this video is about. So where does Sandra actually start? Not with dramatic moves, with the quiet ones, the expenses that have been leaving her account so automatically and for so long that she stopped noticing them. Her fixed costs. On decision 1, fixed costs. Fixed costs are the expenses that arrive regardless of how you feel or what kind of month you had. They set the floor, the minimum your life costs just to stay intact. And in your 30s and 40s, a high floor was manageable because income was still growing. You could earn your way past it. But in your 50s, income is at or near its peak. It is not going to grow significantly from here, which means whatever your fixed costs are right now is essentially what you are taking into retirement. And retirement income is almost always lower than peak working income. A high floor now becomes a crushing floor later. That is why the urgency around fixed costs in your 50s is real. And there are 2 that tend to do the most damage. Every year they go unexamined is another year of runway used without getting lighter. The first is the home, because this one is the hardest to talk about honestly. A home is never just a financial decision. It is identity. It is pride. It is the place you raised your children or worked toward for years, or finally arrived at after decades of showing up. It is the kitchen you renovated and the garden you planted and the neighborhood you chose carefully. And none of that is wrong. None of that was a mistake. That home meant something real when you bought it, and it still means something real now. But in your 50s, your home is also something else. It is one of the biggest variables in whether later life feels financially free or financially trapped. Here is what tends to happen. You bought the home that made sense for your life at the time. The right size, the right neighborhood, the right statement of where you had arrived. The mortgage felt completely manageable against a growing income. But now you are in your 50s. And the house is still large, still expensive to maintain, still carrying a mortgage with years left on it, and still absorbing a significant portion of the cash flow that could be doing something much more powerful for your later freedom. Too much house in your 50s does not just cost money. It costs you financial margin. The real question is not whether you should sell immediately. The real question is whether you have looked at your housing situation honestly through the lens of freedom rather than comfort or habit. Because in your 50s, a home is not only a lifestyle choice, it is a freedom decision. And those are not always the same thing. The second is insurance premiums. And this one is quieter than the house, but it belongs in the same conversation. Health, life, home, auto, premiums that have been leaving your account every single month on autopilot, set years ago when your life looked completely different and never seriously reviewed since. Life insurance especially deserves a fresh look in your 50s. If your children are grown and your mortgage balance is lower than it once was, there is a real chance you are paying for coverage that no longer matches your actual life. A proper review costs nothing but time and can return real money to your monthly picture immediately. Money that could be going somewhere that actually serves your future. Every fixed cost you reduce before retirement directly expands the freedom you have inside it. That is the gap between Sandra and Diane, and it is still closable. Hard decision 2. Debt. We live in an economy where debt can be a genuinely useful tool. For most people, it has been. It bought the home. It funded the education. It bridged the gaps that needed bridging when the timing was not perfect and life could not wait. There is nothing shameful about that. Debt used well is just leverage, and most people in their 50s have used it at some point for something that made complete sense. But in your 50s, that tool starts to change shape, and if you are not paying attention, it can quietly become a weapon aimed directly at the freedom you have been working toward. Because debt in your 50s is a different thing than it was in your 30s or your 40s. Back then, you had time on your side, room to absorb it, grow past it, restructure when needed. The income was still climbing. The options were still wide. But by your 50s, every debt you are still carrying is not just a balance on a statement. It is a claim on your future, a piece of later freedom already spoken for, before you have even decided what you want that freedom to look like. The high-interest debt, credit cards, personal loans, anything carrying a rate that is eating your money faster than it can grow anywhere else. That is the most urgent conversation. Think about it this way. Let us say you are carrying $10,000 on a credit card at 22%, while simultaneously contributing to a retirement account. That debt is costing you $2,200 a year in interest. That same $10,000 in a retirement account growing at 7% is earning you $700 a year, which means every single year you carry both. You are losing $1,500 before you have made a single financial decision. That is what carrying high-interest debt into your 50s actually costs. And remember, the runway is shorter now. Every year that $1,500 disappears is a year you cannot get back. You cannot build freedom with one hand while debt quietly dismantles it with the other. But even the quieter debt deserves honest scrutiny now. The question to ask about every obligation you are still carrying is this: will this still be here when I want to work less? Because debt does not retire when you do. It keeps arriving. And payments that felt completely manageable against a full working income feel very different against a fixed one. Get intentional. Rank every debt by interest rate. Build a real payoff timeline. And treat debt elimination between now and retirement as one of the most powerful moves available to you right now. Because every obligation you remove before that point is not just a number gone, it is a piece of your later life given back to you. Sandra cannot afford to let this one sit. Neither can you. Decision 3. Liquidity. Okay, so Sandra has started tackling her fixed costs. She is getting honest about her debt. But there is something else happening underneath all of it that most people never catch until it is too late. And it has nothing to do with how much money she has. It has everything to do with how much of it she can actually reach. You need to save money outside of your retirement accounts. That is what liquidity means. Money you can actually reach on your own timeline, without penalties, without restrictions, and without perfect timing. Here is what tends to happen as you get closer to retirement. Something shifts, you get serious. You start maxing out your contributions. And from age 50, the government actually lets you put in more, an extra $8,000 a year into your 401k on top of the standard limit. It is called a catch-up contribution, and honestly, the name says everything. You feel like you are finally doing what you should have been doing all along. And if you are in a very high tax bracket, maximizing every dollar inside your tax-deferred accounts still makes sense because that tax break today is genuinely powerful. But for most people, the picture is more nuanced than that. Because the more you funnel everything into retirement accounts, the less liquid your overall financial picture becomes. And liquidity is exactly what your early retirement years are going to demand. Remember, the runway is shorter now, and a shorter runway with no liquid money outside your accounts is one of the most exposed positions you can be in. So, what does liquid money actually look like? Two things specifically: an emergency savings fund, a minimum of 6 months of living expenses sitting in a high-yield savings account, reachable without penalty, without permission, without disrupting anything else, and a taxable brokerage account. Think of it as a regular investment account completely separate from your 401k or IRA. No age restrictions, no withdrawal penalties. You put money in, it grows through investments like index funds, and you can reach it whenever you need it on your own terms. This is not a retirement account, it is a freedom account. And building one in your 50s is one of the smartest moves you can make. You know that moment when something unexpected hits and your first thought is, okay, where is the money coming from? That moment exists at every age. But in your 50s, it lands with a completely different weight. Because in your 30s, an emergency was an inconvenience. In your 40s, it was stressful but manageable. In your 50s, with less runway, higher fixed costs, and retirement no longer abstract, that same emergency can become a spiral that takes years to recover from. A job disruption that would have been a setback at 40 becomes a fundamental threat to your retirement timeline at 55. That buffer is not just financial protection. It is the thing that keeps one bad moment from permanently altering the shape of your later life. And the most damaging of those decisions often starts with Social Security. When people find themselves in a cash crunch with no liquid savings, many of them reach for Social Security before they are ready, and that decision is permanent. Claim at 62, the earliest possible age, and your benefit is reduced by up to 30% for the rest of your life, every single month. But every year you delay past your full retirement age, that benefit grows by approximately 8% annually up to age 70. The difference between claiming at 62 versus waiting until 70 can mean nearly 75% more monthly income for the rest of your life. Liquidity is what protects that choice. It is what lets you wait instead of being forced. Nobody has ever said they wish they had less money accessible outside their retirement accounts. But plenty of people have sat down at retirement and wish they had more. So here is what to do. Before you add another dollar to your retirement account beyond what gets your full employer match, ask yourself honestly, do I have 6 months in accessible savings? Do I have anything growing outside my retirement accounts? If the answer is no, that is where the next dollar goes. The liquidity you build now is what makes the difference between a retirement you control and one that controls you. Decision 4, portfolio and tax positioning. You have been contributing. The accounts have been growing, and that feels like the work is being done. But there is a difference between money that exists and money that is working correctly. And in your 50s, that difference can change the entire retirement picture. Is what you have actually enough? Not roughly enough, not probably enough, actually enough. Because most people in their 50s are working from a number in their head that has never been seriously tested against real math. A rough sense of the balances, a vague feeling that if contributions keep going in, things will probably work out. That feeling is not a retirement plan. And the math does not get more comfortable by being avoided. But here is what most people do not realize. Even when the number feels like it might be enough, how that money is positioned and how it will be taxed when you start using it can change the answer completely. Start with how it is invested. Because how your money was positioned in your 40s is not how it should be positioned now. If nobody has seriously looked at that allocation recently, there is a real chance it is still structured like you have 15 or 20 years to absorb whatever the market decides to do. And the runway is shorter now. A significant market drop close to retirement hits completely differently than one at 44. At 44, you ride it out. Time does the work. But when you are close to retirement and the market drops sharply, you may have to start withdrawing from a portfolio that has already fallen. And once you start pulling money out of something that is down, you are locking in losses that compounding can no longer fix. That window is not what it was. And then there is how it will be taxed. Because this is where people get the most unexpected surprise in retirement. Picture this: you retire and you start pulling money from your accounts to live on. And you realize that almost everything you touch gets taxed. Every dollar you pull is taxed as income. Your Social Security arrives, and that gets taxed too, depending on how much you are pulling overall. And you find yourself thinking, I worked this hard, saved this long, and my tax bill is still this high? That frustration is real, and it almost always comes from having all your money sitting in one type of account with no flexibility over how or when it gets taxed. The goal is to have your money spread across different types of accounts that are taxed differently, so that in retirement, you have choices. You can pull from here this year and from there next year, depending on what makes the most sense. That flexibility is worth building now while the window is still open. Sit down with a financial professional, run the real numbers. Look honestly at how the money is positioned and how it will be taxed when you need it. Because a gap or a structural problem you find at 53 is a completely different situation from one you find at 63. At 53, the runway still has real power in it. Do not wait until that changes. Decision 5. Healthcare cost planning. Healthcare premiums. Some of us have barely thought about them. Some of us are already losing sleep over them. But in your 50s, they become one of the most important numbers in your entire financial plan. And most people never see it coming. Here is why. For most of your working life, your employer has been quietly absorbing the real cost of your healthcare. The number coming out of your paycheck every month, that is not what your coverage actually costs. That is just your portion. And your employer has been paying the rest, often the larger portion, without you ever having to think about it. Which means the moment you retire, that subsidy disappears. And what you are left with is the full, unsubsidized, nobody is helping you anymore cost of staying covered. And that number will stop you in your tracks. Private health insurance without employer contribution can run anywhere from $500 to over $1,500 a month per person. A couple retiring before Medicare could easily be looking at $2,000 to $3,000 every single month just in premiums. Before a single doctor visit. Before anything actually goes wrong. Now, here is where it gets really urgent. Medicare does not start until 65, so if you retire at 62, that is 3 years of private coverage. At 60, that is 5 years. $3,000 a month for 5 years is $180,000. That is not a small line item. That is a number that can completely reshape when you can actually afford to retire. But here's the thing. Your 50s are actually still a really good window to deal with this. Not because the problem is not serious. It is. But because you still have time and you still have tools available that get significantly more expensive or disappear entirely the longer you wait. The first tool is an HSA, a health savings account. If you are currently on a high-deductible health plan, this is one of the most powerful and underused tools available to you right now. Your contributions go in tax-free, the money grows tax-free, and it comes out tax-free when used for medical expenses. And from age 55, you can contribute even more through catch-up contributions. You are essentially building a dedicated healthcare fund with a triple tax advantage. Every dollar you put in now is a dollar that will cover those gap years without touching your retirement accounts or your liquid savings. The second thing to do is go to healthcare.gov. That is the government's health insurance platform. Put in your age and your zip code and see exactly what coverage would cost you without your employer picking up the tab. Whatever number comes back needs to go into your retirement plan as a real fixed cost, not an afterthought. Because right now, while you are still working, you can adjust your saving rate, increase contributions, and build specifically toward that number. That option gets harder the closer you get to retirement. And if long-term care is something you have been putting off thinking about, your 50s are genuinely the sweet spot for that conversation too. Coverage is significantly cheaper now than it will be in your 60s. Waiting feels easier, but it costs more every single year you do. Remember what we said about liquidity. The healthcare gap years are exactly what accessible savings outside your retirement accounts are designed to cover, not a vague emergency. A known, specific, significant expense that is coming regardless of whether you planned for it. The people who retire early and feel genuinely free are not just the ones with the biggest accounts. They are the ones who looked this number in the face while they still had time to do something about it. Decision 6. Lifestyle inflation and adult child support. And while we are being honest about numbers, your lifestyle deserves the same conversation. Because your 50s are the decade when the golden handcuffs tend to snap shut. And most people do not even realize it is happening until they are already trapped. Here is what the golden handcuffs actually mean. You have built a life around your peak income. The mortgage, the cars, the lifestyle, the holidays, the standard of living that finally reflects everything you work toward. And it all feels completely reasonable because you can afford it. Until the day you cannot. Or until the day you want to stop and realize the life you built will not let you. In your 40s, if your income suddenly stopped, you were still seen as mid-career. Employers viewed you as experienced with a long runway ahead. You could take a pay cut and rebuild over 20 years. But in your 50s, the same job loss lands completely differently. Research has found that workers over 50 can take twice as long as younger workers to find new employment. And when they do find something, it is often at a lower salary. Companies going through restructures frequently target their highest paid employees first, which in your 50s is often you. Rebuilding to where you were is no longer a 20-year conversation. The runway is shorter, and the options are narrower. This is why lifestyle inflation is not just a spending problem in your 50s. It is a trap. When your fixed costs, your debt, and your lifestyle all require a very specific income level to stay intact, you stop having choices about your work. Your work starts having choices about you. So, what do you actually do about it? Start with an honest lifestyle audit. Go through every recurring expense and ask one question. Does this serve my future or just my present? Some of it will stay. Some of it will not survive that question. Then calculate your real freedom number, the minimum your life actually needs monthly to function, and work deliberately to bring that number down. Because every $100 you remove from your monthly floor is $100 that stops being a requirement and starts being a choice. And then there is the adult-child conversation. This one comes from love, and that needs to be acknowledged first. The instinct to provide does not switch off when they turn 22. So you help with rent, you cover a bill when things get tight, and you say yes because saying no feels like abandoning them. And you would do anything not to feel like that. But the numbers here are worth knowing. Pew Research found that more than half of parents with adult children between 18 and 34 provided financial support in the past year. The average American parent gives adult children around $1,000 a month. That is, on average, $12,000 a year. Over 5 years, that is $60,000 that could have gone directly toward your retirement freedom. So here is the practical boundary. Decide on a specific amount you can genuinely give without touching your retirement contributions. Make it time-limited, not open-ended and not renegotiated every time life gets hard. And hold one rule above everything else. Support never comes from retirement savings, ever, not once. Because the moment that line gets crossed, your future starts funding someone else's present in a way that is very hard to reverse. Your children have decades to build and recover. You do not have the same runway anymore. A parent who arrives at retirement financially broken cannot help anyone. A parent who arrives financially stable can be generous for a very long time. The boundary is not about love, it is about sustainability. Decision 7. Income protection and insurance planning. Income protection is not the most exciting financial conversation, but it is the foundation that keeps every other decision on this list intact. You cannot catch up if the ground keeps shifting underneath you, and that is exactly why it is last. Not because it is least important, because it is the one that makes everything else possible. And everything we have talked about so far, reducing your fixed costs, eliminating debt, building liquidity, positioning your portfolio, planning for healthcare, tightening your lifestyle, all of it assumes one thing, that your income keeps coming in while you do the work, and most people never stop to protect that assumption. Your ability to earn is still your single most valuable financial asset in your 50s. More valuable than your home, more valuable than your retirement accounts, because without it, everything else on this list stops moving in the right direction simultaneously. And yet, most people in their 50s have insured their car, their home, and their life, but never their income. Disability insurance is the conversation almost nobody is having, and it should be. A serious illness or injury that pulls you out of work at 54 does not just affect your health, it immediately threatens your fixed cost coverage, your debt payments, your retirement contributions, your liquidity building, everything. All 6 decisions we just covered become significantly harder or impossible without income still coming in. The statistics are not comfortable either. About 1 in 4 people starting their careers today will face a disability before reaching retirement age. Your 50s do not make you immune. They make the consequences more serious. So check what you actually have. Many employers offer short-term and long-term disability coverage. Do you know what yours covers and for how long? If the answer is no or not enough, That gap needs closing now while you are still healthy enough and young enough to close it affordably. And while you are reviewing, look at your life insurance too. Are you still paying for coverage that no longer matches your actual life? Children grown, mortgage lower. You may be overinsured in ways that are quietly costing you every single month, or the opposite, underinsured in ways that would leave someone you love genuinely exposed. Either way, it deserves a fresh, honest look. Not someday, now. Protect the income, protect the plan. Because none of the other 6 decisions stay intact without this one underneath them. Now, you have the full map. 7 decisions. 7 places where your 50s still have real power to change what the rest of your life looks like. Sandra has every one of these available to her right now. So do you. The question is not whether these decisions matter. The question is what the life looks like when you actually make them. Remember Sandra, sitting with that birthday cake, feeling the quiet weight of a question she could not yet answer. Whether she actually gets to stop at some point. Whether the life she built is starting to support her, or whether she is still fully supporting it. And remember Diane, same career, same decade, that calm certainty over lunch. Not because she was lucky, not because she earned more, because somewhere along the way, she made the decisions that made her life lighter. That is still available to Sandra, and it is still available to you. Your 50s are not the end of the runway. They are the last real stretch where your decisions still have enough time and power to change what later life actually feels like. Use that stretch deliberately. Because later life will either belong to you or to everything you owed and everything you avoided. That choice is still yours to make. If you found this helpful, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're not subscribed yet, this is your sign. Thank you. And always remember, luxury is easier when your money is organized. I will see you in the next one. And I love you.